Hello and welcome to the Knowing Self, Knowing Others podcast, where we discuss self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe. I'm your host, Nia Thomas, and join me as I talk to today's guest. Today we are joined by Chris Dyer, who is a recognised company culture and remote work expert. As a former CEO managing thousands of people, his companies were consistently named a best place to work. They've also been named a fastest growing company by Inc. magazine 5 times. Chris routinely consults and speaks, and Inc. magazine ranked him as the #1 leadership speaker on culture. He has 2 best-selling books out at the moment, The Power of Company Culture and Remote Work, and has been named #5 on the Leadership Power List, a top 50 voice in leadership, a top 40 change management guru, and a top 50 global thought leader. And that's just this year so far. As a keynote speaker, his goal is to inspire his audiences with straightforward delivery, insightful candor, and engaging humor. His talks offer innovative perspectives on leadership to improve company culture and empower organizations to discover new successes. Countless companies have unlocked productivity, performance, and profits by implementing his 7-pillar strategy. And I'm hoping he's going to tell us a little bit more about that shortly. Chris, it's lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. It's amazing to be here.
Brilliant.
A fun connection to London. They flew me all the way out to do a training for the Ministry of Defense.
Wow.
And
Okay.
the night before I was supposed to go in and work with all of them, they had a COVID big outbreak. And I literally did their training from a Zoom in central London in a hotel.
No. Oh, so near, but so far.
It was all about remote work. And I thought it was so funny that I ended up doing it remotely and not in person because they had like 6 people get COVID or something and they sent everybody home. And this was like all when things were just sort of getting back to normal a little bit,
Okay.
so they were still a little, but anyways, I thought that was a funny story.
Oh my goodness. What's the length of the flight from where you are to stay in a hotel room?
10 hours, 10 and a half
Oh my
hours
gosh.
to London.
20 hours to do a virtual webinar.
But I mean, listen, I went and got in a car and went to Bath and to York and to Liverpool and
amazing.
into Wales. We did it up. So, I mean, they paid for me to get there and come home, and I went and did the rest. So it was great. I was happy.
Oh, amazing. So it wasn't all bad.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Chris, tell us about your 7-pillar strategy. What's it all about?
Yeah, I mean, I probably could fill up the entire podcast with just this answer. So I'll try to be brief. But back in 2008, there was a huge recession in the world, but especially the United States. And I found myself with 40% of my clients gone, 40% of my receivables gone, right? And I had to figure out how in the heck am I going to save this business? And that led us down 2 roads. Number 1, we went remote work to save money. We didn't do it because we thought remote work was great. We did it to save money, right? Got rid of the building, got rid of all these expenses. But the other thing was we needed to fix our culture. Mm-hmm. This was the moment I realized I felt like it was on me and me alone to solve all of these problems that we were having. And I thought, this is stupid. It shouldn't be on just me. I should be able to call on my team and we should be able to do this together. But I had screwed up. I had not built the company that way. I had built it to where everything came through my head and I could double check and triple check and stamp my approval on every little thing, because it worked in the beginning when we were a small company, but we weren't small anymore. And so I said, great, I'm going to change my culture. We're going to do it the right way. What's the right way to do it? There isn't an answer. There isn't a book. There isn't like a blueprint for me out there. And I asked and I asked and I read hundreds of books and I talked to every smart person and they all told me the same things, but no one had it written down. And that's the 7-pillar strategy. What are those 7 things that I consistently heard from the smartest people in the room, most successful people who have great cultures, had great companies, or, maybe like there was a great book and they focused on one of those things. Yeah. Like, for example, listening, right? There's lots of books about listening, but no one says, hey, you better be good listeners in your company if you want to have a great culture. And so that's what my attempt is to help every business leader out there, whether you're the CEO or you're a middle manager with, 10 direct reports, what in the world are you supposed to focus on if you want to have a great culture? And that's the answer I tried to give everyone.
So, if you could pick one of those seven to tell us a little bit more about, maybe does one of them underpin everything else? Which one would you talk about if you were talking about it right up front?
Sure. I'll give you the one that I think is where people often will target as an area of weakness for them. And they often find the most growth by going after this pillar. But to answer your question, there isn't a pillar that's like the one that underpin. They all are like, if you had a giant Venn diagram, that's where all those circles overlap each other. It would be
Yeah.
quite a very complicated Venn diagram. They all overlap each other, all important.
Okay.
And usually when I work with companies or I go speak, to a keynote, they identify, hey, we're good at these two or three. And we're okay at this one, but man, are we bad at those? Like, okay,
Okay.
Chris, but it's different for every company. Some are good at listening, some aren't, right? So, but I think the pillar that we should talk about is transparency.
Okay.
Almost every time that a company is struggling and the senior managers are saying, why aren't our people getting it? Why aren't they doing what I want them to do? It's because there's no transparency.
Okay.
Those people at the highest levels know everything, but the people below them don't know everything. And how can you possibly expect them to make great decisions, have great ideas, come up with innovative, products and services and suggestions and even just problem solve properly if you don't know what everybody else knows, right? It's such a
Okay.
basic thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like parenting. When our kids, they come up and they start doing stupid things, and you're like, hey, don't do that. And they're like, either they
Why?
ignore you or they ask why. Like, if you could, you're like, listen, I did that when I was your age and I ended up with 3 broken bones and like I was in the hospital. Like, you don't want to do that. I have knowledge they don't have. Thank God employees aren't children. We can have a more, equitable conversation of like, here's what I did, here's what we know works. This could get us into trouble. Like, sharing that knowledge is so key.
Listeners and watchers, we will make sure that there is a link in the show notes to Chris's book. So, Chris, tell us a bit about your journey to being a leader. So, in the introduction, I talked about you leading organizations that had thousands of employees. How did you get there?
Yeah, I don't know why. There are many leaders who are made who choose to learn and do it. I think there are some people that like came out and were like, "Hey, I want to be in charge of something." That was kind of me. Like, I was always the team captain. I was always the one organizing people. I don't know where this came from, but I was always sort of in that role, right? And if I wasn't in that role, I noticed as a child I was very unhappy.
Okay.
I had to learn as an adult to take a step back and allow other people. That was a real area of growth for me, to let them take responsibility, let them be the leader, and me
Hmm.
to shut up and just be along for the ride. After years and years of being responsible for everything, I'm really happy to like take the back seat sometimes now, right? But as a kid, like, that was a natural thing for me. And it was in that moment before I started my business. So 9/11 had a big impact on me. I was working for somebody else and I was in the office very early that day at 6 a.m. and I'm watching the planes hit the buildings in real time. Interesting fact, most people on the West Coast were waking up to it already happening.
Okay.
And right, were asleep. And so I was watching it live, which was sort of an unusual thing for people in our part of the world. And it was like someone had released a spell. It was like, if we want to go to Harry Potter, it's like someone had me under this, certain spell where like I was doing what was not supposed to be doing. And what that was is I was supposed to be running my own business. I was always entrepreneurial. I always wanted to be a business owner. And here I was taking the safe route because I had a mortgage and a car payment and I'm working for somebody else and I'm miserable.
Okay.
But I'm safe and everything's okay. And the second plane hit that building, and I went, oh, I'm screwing up my life. Life's too short. What am I
Yeah.
doing? It was just this like incredible reminder of we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I'm not going to sit around any longer. So I literally quit my job that week. And by November 1st, I had started my company, which I had until I sold at the end of 2021.
And tell us, what did your company do? What was your area of interest?
Yeah, so we did background checks and drug testing, and essentially this is a very American thing, not so popular in the UK, but we did, if somebody was applying for a job, you know, were they telling the truth on their CV? Were they, did they really go to that school? Do they have a criminal record that might be problematic? And, there's certain types of people we don't want to be working with children or have access
That's
to your
right.
bank accounts. And right. So we did that work. And if you're a private company, you have to do it privately versus if you're a public company, you get the government's database. But that's what we did. And we started with just 2 employees. And when I left, I had 45 direct reports and 4,500 people and independent contractors working below me. So
That's amazing. Yeah, I guess in the UK, my background is in early years preschool children. So our disclosure and barring service is very, very important to us. That
yeah.
work is really valuable. Talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on self-awareness. As everybody knows, that this podcast is about self-awareness and self-aware leadership specifically. How do you define self-awareness?
I think I go back all the way to Socrates, which is self-awareness is the notion that I don't know everything and I probably never will.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to keep walking down a path that is infinite. In fact, I will die long before I ever get any real distance on that path. And that I am always learning. I'm always something for me to discover along that path. And that there's never going to be a moment when I'm walking on that path and I go, oh, that's it. I've learned it all. I've got it all. Everything is figured out. I know it all. I've memorized every fact. I mean, it's just not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But we're okay with that. And we're okay with this. It's always about learning. It's always about getting better. It's always about teaching and helping others. And I think every leader I've ever met where I would call them, I would sort of phrase them in the way that you asked the question. They're lifelong learners, right? They are so self-aware that I have brought up Harry Potter twice now. I don't know why, but there was a really funny line in one of the Harry Potter books where they talk to Harry's uncle, Vernon Dursley, and one of the wizards says, "What you don't know would fill volumes." Right?
Yeah.
It would fill a library full. It was like, and it was a funny like burn. It was a joke, but like what I don't know could fill a universe full of library, right? And I know that, and I'm okay with that. And I need my people to help me, and I need every resource I can. And the moment I meet someone who thinks they know it all, I'm out. Like, where's the door? I'm
Yeah.
gone as quickly as I can.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with you. And that's why my book is called The Self-Awareness Superhighway, because it's an ongoing journey. Absolutely agree with you. So, what's the fit between self-awareness and self-aware leadership and culture? Because the research that I've done suggests that you have to have leaders who behave in a way that they model the behavior that they want to see, and that effectively drives the culture. Is that what you're finding out in the world? And what else does that include in terms of self-awareness and culture?
Yeah, I mean, so if we think about culture in a couple different ways, right? So the CEO or the senior leaders, they are setting the direction. They are saying, "Hey, we're going over here. This is who we are. This is what we do." If we want to use the full ship analogy, this is where we're going. This is our path. This is our cargo. This is why we're doing what we're doing, right? Are we delivering sugar? Are we pirates or whatever the thing is? Like,
Yeah.
this is who we are, right? And then you have the leadership in the middle, which is ultimately there to reinforce that and to help and to push that to every part of the organization, from internally to externally. And then you have the people there to hopefully be rowing the boat in the right direction and to be bringing their energy and their creativity and their strengths to that endeavor. But what's interesting is like learning and all of those things that we're talking about are so important, but they're in some ways table stakes. And that's the minimum you got to bring to the game, right? That's the
Hmm.
minimum amount of money you got to bring to show up. This is your table stakes. You better show up and be that kind of person. Because, like my 7 pillar framework, learning is not even one of those things. It's assumed you're going to be that type of person,
Okay.
right? To
Hmm.
at least be good If you want to be great, here are the things you have to work on. But if you at least want to be a good manager, you better be self-aware. You better be a lifelong learner. You better be really focusing on those things to keep your people around for any length of time.
So, how do you make sure that people within your organization or your company really understand what an organization is about? How do you make sure that the values that an organization has really feeds through from the leaders of that organization, or from the strategy, from your corporate strategy to your leaders, to everybody else in the organization?
Yeah, so I mean, we have to define them. We have to talk about what our values are and what our purpose is. I mean, go back to Simon Sinek's work, right? Start with why. Why are we here? And what is it what we're trying to do? And it's not to make money. That's a necessary thing that we typically need to do, or fundraise if you're maybe a nonprofit. But like there's a purpose. And so what is that purpose and what are our values? And then we have to keep talking about them. We have to
Mhm.
hire leaders that are passionate about those values and that purpose. And then those leaders need to go hire more people that are passionate and care about those values. And then we have to keep talking about them. It can't be like one time on an interview and then we never talk about them again. There's on some wall somewhere,
Yeah.
right? We had our values and purpose identified, and it was on every slide internally. It was on, we would bring it up in company meetings all the time. We would have people share why maybe something happened in the organization, and they talked about how they could use one of our values as a way to sort of interpret their response and what they would. We were constantly, you want to call it marketing, you want to call it propaganda, I don't care, but you have to be constantly educating and reminding people about this stuff, or they start creating their own realities and their own cultures and their own, or bringing their own separate values, which are great. Everyone has their own value system, right? But there's like the overarching company value system, and you better be connected into that somehow in a healthy way. If you as an employee look at your values of your company or you don't think they're living them, get out,
Yeah.
go, because you're never going to be happy, right? But the company has to do a good job of being very consistent in communicating.
I think what I heard is that if you're reinforcing it both explicitly and subliminally, that helps to make sure that you're living it and you're living your values all of the time.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You mentioned hiring a few times as you were talking there. How are you finding that people are making sure that people who hold those values and have that right idea about the culture of an organization through recruitment processes?
We have to be careful because what we don't want to do is tell everyone, hey, our values are accountability and, I don't know, whatever the things are. Let's just say accountability is one of them. And then you start asking them, well, do you care about accountability? And tell me the 5 ways that you care about accountability. Employees are just going to weave that labyrinth to try to
Yeah,
get the job, right? This
yeah,
is not really what we're talking about. We took the approach of we just wanted to communicate to them, this is what our values are. We're not asking you to regurgitate back to us that you agree. We did tell them, you need to decide if you think this is a good value system. If you
mhm,
want to work for an employer whose values are these, that's up to you. But be fair warned, when you come in the organization, we care about these and we are going to lean on these all day long. So we didn't try to get people to I probably lie at some point, right? Or give us some crappy answers that made us feel good that we were hiring someone that way.
mhm,
And I think most importantly, we weren't filtering out people with different voices,
yeah,
right? Because I want people who think differently, who maybe have different personal values, but are okay with what the company's value. At least they know what they are and they're okay with them and they're willing to reinforce them every day with us. But they're going to bring their own value set. I mean, one of my top 5 values is travel. That has nothing to do with anything we ever did in every company I had, right? But
mhm.
like for me, travel is a value. Like I love to get on a plane. I love to meet new people. I love to try the food and the cultures. And like, that's just something, it's a personal value. That's never going to connect to the company value, but that's okay, right? So we want to make sure that we're not filtering the wrong people in that situation. I think that was always our fear, is that we would just get the same person over and over and over again who would just nod their head yes and lie
Yeah.
to us and tell us what we wanted to hear, and then did whatever they wanted behind our backs.
Yeah. And I think that's something that organizations are really trying to get to grips with is how do we make sure that we employ people who will support us in delivering our values whilst we're still ensuring that we have cognitive diversity within the organization. And I think that's a
Mhm.
really tricky to join up those lines between those needs of an organization.
Just like that long walk we mentioned, it is a struggle and it is a path, and you're never going to get there all the way. It's just, at least you're pointing somewhere and you're trying your best.
Yes, I guess you have to keep trying if that's what your organization wants and that's the direction you want to head into. So tell us about remote working. You said that you were in the world of work when remote working became a new thing. Where do you think we are now?
Well, it really depends on where you are in the world, I think, at some
Okay.
level. But let's talk about what happened, what's good. Remote work and COVID specifically, right? So, I mean, I took my people fully remote back in 2008, and we hid it from everybody. And it wasn't until a few years before COVID that we finally started admitting it, because it wasn't such a bad thing.
Okay.
We always pretended to have an office somewhere, and, like, it was a whole thing. COVID happened and it democratized work for people. So most managers had hybrid work. They could
Yeah.
choose to work from home. They may had to go to a different office or go visit a client or hop on a plane, and they were doing hybrid anyways. But the average employee had to go in an office, had that very structured assembly line mentality of, you're at your desk at 9, you don't leave until 5, and all that stuff, right? So we democratized it for people and allowed so many companies and leaders to realize that their people could be wonderfully effective and do a great job, and can continue to do that, whether it's remote or hybrid or as needed. We've seen organizations go the other direction, but and I know there's a lot of frustration in the world of remote work around this, but I would say, are more people working remotely today than they were a few years ago? Absolutely. Has this movement moved forward in a very positive way? Absolutely.
Mhm.
Are people able to, like, take their kid to the doctor for an hour and come back to work and not have to take a whole day off and
Yeah.
waste an entire day, which they could have taken a vacation and said, absolutely. Right. So I think from that perspective, it's gotten a lot better. The technology got, because it had to in such a short period of time, got a lot better. So we're in a pretty good place. I mean, I never would have thought that everybody would have had a taste of remote work. Like, just about everyone in the world got some taste, it felt like. That's that was like 20 years of progress in a year,
Yeah,
right?
I think you're
So
right.
I think overall, if I look at it, the wheels of progress move very, very slowly, and we
Mhm.
actually got them to speed up a little bit during a short period of time.
Yeah. I was thinking I worked for an organization back in 2004 to 2007, and we worked in a remote way, and we had PDAs that never connected until you plugged your computer in. And we didn't really talk very much about it because everybody else was in an office. Then there was this huge gap in the middle until COVID. And then, as you say, the big bang of COVID and the digital explosion was quite something else. How can leaders make remote workers feel part of something, make them feel part of those values and the fabric of their organization?
Well, so we talked about how to create culture, talk about culture, where that lies, but I think the biggest place where culture occurs is in meetings.
Mhm.
And so this is also where we can help our people connect and feel good about the culture and be reward those behaviors that we want from people in that way, and maybe discourage those behaviors that we don't want. And that all happens in meetings. So I'll tell you right now, if you're a leader and you're having the same meeting over and over and over again, you're doing it wrong. If you
Okay.
keep calling a 1 hour meeting every single time, or a 30-minute meeting every single time, you are screwing it up. But don't worry, I'll help you. We have the answer. I'm not going to criticize you without giving you some suggestions. What we found was that people felt more connected when our meetings changed. And so we did a few things. Some meetings we democratized to where anybody could call the meeting. It
Okay.
wasn't just the leader could call the meeting. Now, you might ask a fellow employee to meet with you or your boss to meet with you, but rarely does like somebody just say, "Hey, I want to meet with everybody on the team. I'm going to call the meeting. I'll invite my boss, but I'm going to call the meeting." Unless you're running like Scrum or something like that, that's not a very normal
Mm.
occurrence. And so we created this meeting called a cockroach meeting, which is 15 minutes long. It's about
Okay.
one topic, optional for people to attend, and anyone could call the meeting. And you always start on time. You never go over 15 minutes, right? In fact, the goal is to end early. We used to have about 45 cockroach meetings going on a day at the company. They averaged about 8 minutes, and anybody could call them, right? If you invited me to a cockroach meeting in an hour and the topic was, I don't know, how do I do this thing with my podcast? And I can't come, I just tell you I can't come. I'm sorry. I'm already busy. I got too much work to do. It's okay. But that person can get the information they need. So
I've got to ask, why is it
oft,
called a cockroach meeting?
good. If you have a cockroach in your bathroom, it's a small problem. You may not want to be the one who cleans it up, but it's a single small little problem we can deal with,
Oh,
right? We can
okay. Yeah.
quickly clean up the cockroach, throw them away, put them in the toilet, whatever. Like it's small problem, ended, done,
I
right?
love it. Okay. I got it.
Now, there's another meeting called a tiger team meeting. Now,
Oh,
imagine if there was a tiger in your bathroom.
okay. Right. Yeah, I'm getting it.
Much bigger problem, right?
Yeah.
Now it tells everybody, long meeting, big deal, lots of support, lots of preparation, post and pre to the meeting. I mean, we're gonna have a handful here. There's a tiger in there, right?
Yeah.
Totally different reaction. And then we might
I'm
have,
sharing this with my team tomorrow. I think they're going to love
yeah,
those two.
yeah, and these are all in the book. And so cockroach is great because it's like, hey, I just need like your quick little help. Just help me really quick. How do I do this thing? Or the client called and I have no idea what to do. And so what we did was we removed that them waiting for their team meeting,
Okay.
waiting to meet with their boss, or having to make a bunch of calls, calling their team members one at a time. Hey, this client called. I don't know how to do this thing. And they go, I don't know either. Why don't you call Jane? Call Jane. Jane, I'll do this thing. I don't know.
Okay.
Call Jason. They spent their whole day running around with their heads cut off trying to find a solution. Instead, invite everyone to this 15-minute meeting. Now we all connect, collaborate. There's no how's it going? How's the weather? What are your kids up to? No, it's hey, everyone, thanks for being here. The client called, I don't know how to do this thing. One person goes, you know what? I think one time we tried this. Three other people go, I got no idea. Hey, but we should probably talk to Tom and see in IT. He might have a great idea. Okay, cool. Now I know where I should go for my next call. Done. You don't know how empowering that is for people that they got their problem solved in 8 minutes when people are
Yeah.
telling me it could take a week or two to find out what they're really supposed to do. And your client's waiting and waiting
Absolutely. And
and
you're
waiting.
right. Doing that in a hybrid way means it's pretty much instantaneous. If people are available, you all dive onto a call, you sort out the cockroach, and then you can all go back and do what you need to do.
All about your work. But
Amazing.
if, let's say, you're going to get a client who's going to double your business next month, we might want to call a Tiger Team meeting. And this would be called by a manager or a leader. And we're going to have an agenda and we're going to have, hey, what do we have to do? And this department's going to report and this department's going to, I mean, it's a big deal,
Hmm.
right? Totally different focus. That could be an hour meeting. That could be an all day offsite, right? And so the focus is there. Now, we also had ostrich meetings, which was help me get my head out of the sand, which of course
Okay.
ostriches don't really do that, but we all know that imagery, which is just, I don't know how to do something. Does anyone know how to do a pivot table in Excel?
Uh-huh.
Ostrich meeting at 1 o'clock. Whoever knows how to do this, please help me. I don't know. Or
Amazing.
and they might be like, hey, we don't need the meeting. Here's the link. You can learn it on Excel. Well, I don't, yeah, but I'm having a hard time. Can someone show me? Okay, cool. We'll hop on the call, whoever's there. But also other people are exposed to it. They go, oh, I don't know how to do a pivot table. I would like to learn how to do that. And they hop on the call for 15 minutes. And now they just learned, right? So we have all these people bouncing around the organization, like we would in the halls of a company, collaborating information, exchanging ideas, having a moment to talk to other people, and we start creating the stickiness of culture through our meetings.
It was interesting.
And
Before we got onto the call, I was thinking about what is culture, and I was thinking it's all the bits of glue in between the strategic objectives that we set ourselves in an organization. So culture is glue, people. It's glue.
it's glue, and it better be sticky. It better not be that crappy Post-it glue. It better be like really good glue, right? We want some good stuff in there. So, yeah, I
Amazing.
really think meetings are what we need to do.
And Chris, you said the descriptors for these type of meetings, you said they're in your remote workbook
They're
or
in
for
both the
anybody.
books, Remote Workbook and the new one, The Power of Company Culture, second edition. They're both in there.
Amazing. So if listeners, watchers, you want to find out more, make sure you go to the link in the show notes. So, Chris, if you're new to doing this, if you're new to leading a hybrid team, what are the things that you need to do to start with? What are the things you've got to do first to really set out your stall or set out that groundwork?
So, a few things I suggest for all hybrid remote leaders, especially. One, make sure that we are being equal. There's some equity about how we meet. So, if we're hybrid and we have some people out of the office and some people in the office, everyone should log into their Zoom or Teams or whatever they do. I don't like it when three people go sit in the conference room and two people dial in, and the three people are having this side conversation before they get on and another
Okay.
conversation after, and the people who are outside the office don't get that. It's better if we all show up, we all have the same meeting together in the same platform as much as possible. Sometimes it's not logistically possible, but when everyone is pretending we're remote, essentially, we have a better outcome.
Ah, that's really interesting because something that we do in my organization, we do have hybrid meetings. So there may well be a room where there's 4 or 5 people and there may be 10 people on the call. But I've never thought about it
Yeah.
in that way. I'll put that question to the team, see what they all think about it.
Yeah. If you have to do it that way, then just make sure the rule is let's not talk about anything about the meeting until our teammates are on board,
Yeah, I
right?
can see that.
But you will have this sort of social time. And
Yeah.
a lot of people report when they come in, they feel like they're in the middle of the conversation. They're not starting at the beginning like everybody else is. And so now they
Okay.
feel disconnected, right? And we can
Yeah.
easily eliminate that by just changing how we're meeting. Number two, and this is always the most controversial thing I say, I think that anyone who is leading a remote or hybrid team needs to stop having one on one calls.
Okay. Tell me more
So
about that.
here's the exception. If someone's struggling, you're trying to coach them, they're on a PIP, I mean, they're going to maybe get fired, there's an HR issue, of course, go have your one on one. If you're working with them directly on a project and it's just the two of you, of course, go have your one on one. But I think that one-on-one calls where it's your manager, hey, let's this week talk about your goals and how you're doing and blah, 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 blah. First of all, those meetings are generally pretty repetitive and pointless. Your boss ends up canceling them half the time because they get busy and they push it to next week. Most people, when I say that, they roll their eyes and go, oh my gosh, my boss cancels my one-on-one all the time.
Hmm.
And so they have that time fixated on their calendar, but then it's not valuable, or they report that it really wasn't, nothing happened. Bosses, on the other hand, say they get stuck having to make all these decisions. They got their employees that come to them and say, oh, I finally get you an hour of your time. Here's the 19 things I need you to make a decision on now.
Hmm.
And they weren't ready for that. They don't have the information.
Okay.
Maybe they need to talk to other people. And so it's a really bad decision making matrix. Instead, have all of that in a team meeting.
Okay.
Have that. Why not get your, so I used to get my like 5 senior people together once a week, and we would do a call together. We would all support each other on our goals. We would all talk about what's working and where we are struggling and what's happening. So as a group, it's sort of like converting from individual therapy to group therapy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a therapist that things are going bad and we need to talk to somebody one-on-one. But most of the time, what we need is group therapy, right? It's better to get other people's opinions and collaborations and experiences and hear how they're dealing with things and give them support and to feel better that we're not alone in the world. that's kind of what we need more in the workplace, especially in remote and hybrid. So shifting to this, let's let the team help each other. Now we're collaborating, we're talking. I can, as the boss, I can answer questions, give answers, give decisions with the whole group there, and knowing that we're there. We're also removing gossip and
Mm,
politics. A lot of times people would come to my one-on-ones and they were like, "Oh, did you know what Tom did? I want to be the one to tell you this, but I heard Tom did blah,
okay.
blah, blah." I don't want to hear that stuff. Do you have a problem with Tom? Go deal with Tom. And if you can't get it resolved, then I will pull all three of us in and we'll have a meeting. But don't
Hmm.
come and like play that game with me. I know what you're doing. Like there'd be sort of those bad behaviors sometimes. In a group setting, they don't do that.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So it also takes the pressure off of the leader to be the coach and to be the one to solve all of their problems. And instead puts them in the role of being a support mechanism,
Hmm.
right? Not every leader is a great coach. Not every leader has all the answer. Not every leader can do all of that. And they feel overwhelmed and stretched and just, and so let the group do it, right?
I like
That
that.
also
Yeah,
brings in transparency. We all know what
of
each other's
course.
goals are.
Yeah,
We
okay.
all know what we're supposed to be focusing on, right? We all know how we're doing. And so there's really good transparency there, and we're not hiding anything. So that's a big shift for people. But when I trained like over 200 organizations during COVID on remote work,
Hmm.
and the meeting types was the most popular thing they would add, and they loved them. They begrudgingly would try the no one-on-one thing, and they would go kicking and screaming, and then come back to me 2 weeks later and say, "You've just saved me hours.
Oh, wow.
I've just
Okay.
got my life back." Right? I can actually get work done during the day. I'm not having to take it home with me and do it at night because I'm not on 10 back to back to back to back one-on-one calls all day.
Yeah.
So it's very empowering for the leaders.
That's an interesting thing to think about, especially when you have organizations that mandate one-to-one meetings. And I think certainly my 25 years in the world of work, I'm indoctrinated into having these supervision sessions and one-to-one sessions. That's a lot to think about. Something that I'm
Yeah.
interested in your thoughts. We are hearing far more about organizations who are monitoring their staff and saying, we want you to come back into the office because we want to see you. We want to know that you're doing stuff. Yet I'm not seeing the balancing data or the stats that says that productivity is going down and that actually people need to be seen and watched. What are your thoughts on that issue that people have is, I need to see you?
Yeah. The overwhelming data says that productivity and performance and profits all go up with remote work.
Hmm.
There are examples where that is not true, but that tends to be because there's a larger cultural problem. When they say they want you back in the office because they want to see them, watch them, all of that, that's the old command and control. That's the old, I don't know how to manage correctly, so I'm going to manage by watching you.
Mm,
And we know that doesn't work. We know that isn't needed. Now there are absolutely good reasons to be in the office and be together. There are times when being together, creating that connection is important. There are times when the job that we do, we can do better together. Maybe we're inventing, maybe we're coding, maybe we're, literally you got to hold and touch the thing that we're talking about because we're trying to figure out how to make it better, right? I mean, no one on a Formula One team is working on a car is doing it remotely, even though there's
sure.
all this technology. I mean, they're holding the thing, right? So there are reasons, but most of the ones we're hearing in the news are just veiled attempts to either reduce their workforce without calling it a layoff and
Hmm.
forcing people back. And it's just a trick because they know some people won't come back. They lose
Yeah.
that head
Okay.
count, and now they don't have
Hmm.
to say they did a layoff.
Yeah.
Number two, they just don't know how to lead people. Three, they have expensive office buildings that are empty and
Yeah.
some senior leaders are sitting in an office by themselves and no one's there to tell them how good and smart they are or laugh at their stupid jokes, and they want people around. So the data overwhelmingly says remote work is better.
So the last question I'm going to ask you before we say goodbye for today is, what is the future of remote work?
What is the future? I think it's going to be segmented. So there's the digital nomad, entrepreneurial single person, not single as in married, but like, the one woman or one man show they've always existed. They'll continue to exist. And I think they could continue to expand because there's so many countries offering these remote work visas and things like that. So that's a population that may continue to grow and democratize work around the world for people to be able to say, I'm going to go live in Thailand or Croatia or whatever. For the general population of people, there's going to be that segmentation where there are definitely employers who are remote work friendly, remote work first, hybrid, whatever that may be. It will probably be 10 or 15 years before the real data comes out that those companies absolutely kicked everyone else's butts.
Okay.
Right.
So you think it's going to be a very much a 50-50 kind of picture out there?
Yeah. I mean, you have some really, really big companies saying that people have to come back. We can't possibly do it. You have Nvidia, which is like this, they make little microchips, so like $1 trillion company. And the other day, the CEO was like, I don't care if people work from home. Like, that's cool. He's like, they do the work. We have good metrics. We know if they're doing a good job. I don't care where they work. That's a very liberated mind saying something like that from $1 trillion company. And yet we have other organizations doing not even half of that going, we can't see you. We can't possibly manage you, right? I mean, there's a huge difference there.
Yeah, I think that polarity between the two opinions I'm finding quite, I suppose, bizarre, but also interesting to watch from the world of work and seeing how that's going to develop. Chris, has been a brilliant opportunity to have the conversation with you. Is there one thing, one nugget that you would like to leave with people just before we finish?
One nugget. Boy, you gave me a tough one. I think the one nugget I might leave with everyone is what you focus on grows. So if you want something good to keep happening, go focus on what's good. Go focus on what your best employees are doing, what great employees are doing. Go focus on that. Get curious and talk about that. If you focus on what everyone's doing wrong, that's just going to get worse, right? So what you focus on always grows.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Chris. It's been really interesting having a conversation with you. For today, Chris Dyer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. Please remember to leave a rate and review on your favourite podcast platform because a little word from you means a big deal to me. You can also sign up for my newsletter on my website, knowingself.knowingothers.co.uk. Join me next week when we discuss self-aware leadership with thinkers from around the globe to generate kinder, more respectful and creative working relationships through reflection, recognition and regulation. Looking forward to having you on my learning journey.